are definitely going to need more than one part for this list. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. I'm your host, Amanda McKnight. Today we're counting down the top 10 mutants we want to see in the MCU. Wait, only 10? 10? Number 10, Mystique. Seriously, I do not know how I'm going to narrow this list down to like just 10 mutants, but I'm definitely going to try my best. So don't judge me too harshly for the 10 that I pick, because you know, there's like over 100 I want to see, really. Mystique is another iconic mutant that we would need to have again in the films. Despite the fact that we've already gotten 2 iterations of this character who were both really great, there is always room for more Mystique, I think. She also happens to be one of the best mutant villains out there because she's a complex character who doesn't really believe in right or wrong, just what she needs to get done. She's out to protect herself whatever the cost, and sometimes even to protect those who are closest to her and who she loves. Or simply to hurt people that have hurt her, those are the people who she loves. Number 9, Multiple Man. Multiple Man is Jamie Madrox. I don't know why I love Jamie so much. It could have to do with the fact that he's a bit of a mess, and the idea that even if you could make countless duplicates of yourself, Jamie kind of proves that it might still not be enough. You know, if you can't get your own self and your own stuff together. I feel like I relate to that as a person who's trying to do a million things and is sometimes like, I feel like it's the fact that I'm not together that's preventing this from happening. He's like a lovable oaf sometimes too. That and his power is actually really cool and really interesting, and wouldn't be too hard to do from a visual effects standpoint anyways, at least in terms of having the duplicates appear on screen. And it's a role that would likely be really fun to play, as whoever plays Jamie would also get to play all of his dupes. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and this channel, please head on over to follow us on Facebook. It really does help us out here, and we want to bring you lots of cool fresh content over there, so the more we grow, the more we can give to you. Number 8, Jean Grey. Jean Grey is another mutant that people are likely hyped to see again, despite the fact that the Dark Phoenix film was not quite up to standard when it came to what fans and moviegoers were hoping for. We've seen Famke Janssen and Sophie Turner portray the character, but who will be next? Jean is such a complex and interesting character who, if played right, I think could be one of the most loved mutant team members. There are times when she is sassy and powerful, but she also generally manages to be compassionate and caring as well. She's a great role model and one of the most powerful mutants in the world. Not only that, but Jean is also one of the original members of the X-Men who, like Bobby Drake, has only gotten cooler as time goes on. Pun definitely intended. Number 7, Madelyne Pryor. Madelyne Pryor might usually be on the side of evil, but that does not stop me from wanting her in the MCU. We need a lot of good villains in here. In fact, give me all the mutant villains in the MCU. There are just so many good ones. Included in that group of good baddies is Maddie for sure. The Goblin Queen almost helped to open a gate to Limbo, which would have allowed the world to have been overrun by demons and monsters back in Inferno. Aside from that, the whole reason she is a villain has to do with her questioning her own validity as a person after her husband left her, and she found out she was a clone of his ex, who he basically had left her for when she had returned. Jean Grey. Maddie has always lived in Jean's shadow and is a great foil for that character, as well as the mutant hero team that Jean often fights alongside. She'd also be a super fun character to play in a film, especially if the performer playing her was also playing Jean. I mean, I would love to play Jean and Maddie in a movie. That would be so much fun. Both those characters are so different and so cool, it's a good time. Number 6, Gambit. Gambit is another hero that many were hyped to see appear. Well, I think for some there were conflicting feelings in regards to the project he was supposed to appear in before, but I'm sure a lot of people were excited about it. Gambit back in the days of Fox was meant to be in a film that we'd be getting starring Channing Tatum as Gambit. Now, due to delays with Disney buying 21st Century Fox and the project changing hands, as well as script issues when it came to the plot and direction of the story, the film never happened. However, Gambit is still a super popular character who I think many of us would love to see appear on the big screen, especially in his own solo film. I was even intrigued enough by the project that I would have been super interested to see Tatum's take on Gambit. Should Disney and Marvel possibly feature Gambit in the MCU and still want to keep that casting? I mean, I'm still kinda here for that. I think it's a weird casting, but I think it could also be really good. Number 5. Magneto. Magneto is probably one of the most fierce and important enemies and later allies the X-Men have had throughout their comic book history. He was also the first villain to ever appear in the comics for them, appearing as the antagonist in the very first issue of Uncanny X-Men issue number 1, back in the 1960s. In the films, Magneto has also been legendary, and it's because of this that most people would likely enjoy seeing him return to the big screen in the MCU. Now, whether or not we get someone new or see either Ian McKellen or Michael Fassbender return to the role has yet to be decided. In fact, we may even see someone completely new take the role upon themselves, as this is a fresh continuity. But one thing is for certain, you can't have an X-Men franchise without Eric, or Max if you prefer, somewhere in there. Number 4. Professor X. What would a mutant film / world be without Professor X? I mean, he's basically the reason that the X-Men exist. So if we're going to have that team or some variation of that team in the films, then I think we kinda need Professor X to be there. I know some people might be thinking right now, but wait a minute, Amanda, we already got Professor X in the MCU in Multiverse of Madness. But we didn't really. We got a variant of Professor X from an alternate reality who seems to have a similarity to both Fox's older Professor X with Patrick Stewart returning to reprise that role, and the 90s animated series Professor X with that big yellow hovercraft version of a wheelchair. So we still technically need a main continuity Professor X in the MCU. Whether that's James McAvoy or Patrick Stewart or someone new, someone will likely need to fill in that role. Or at least we need someone to bring the X-Men together if it's not Professor X, but I feel like to not have Professor X would be a little, I don't know if I feel comfortable with it. It's kind of integral to the X-Men. Number 3. Storm. Obviously a mutant that we're all excited to see join the MCU is Storm. She is hands down and across the board a favorite among fans of the 90s animated series, the comics, and even of the Fox film franchise, where Halle Berry played her. Storm is a legendary character though, which means casting her will be challenging, as Marvel Studios and Disney will want to make sure they really pick the perfect person for this role. This isn't just complicated in regards to finding the right performer who is able to pull off the look and, you know, the whole persona of Storm, but it's also deciding what distinct look and what kind of distinct persona they want to use for this character, because she's had a lot of changes throughout her history. What part of Storm's story they want to tell, what point in her life do they want to use to introduce her, and then of course there's making sure that the performer they pick to play her is a sound investment, as this person will likely be in the franchise for a long time and will hopefully be one of the main faces for the franchise. I'd really love to have like a big Storm element in whatever mutant thing we get. I personally think Storm should have her own movie. Storm's awesome. Number 2. Wolverine. One of the mutants that everyone seems to be the most hyped for, and to see make an appearance and return to the big screen in the MCU, is Wolverine. While some are hoping for Hugh Jackman to don the claws once more and reprise his role as Logan, others are just excited about the return of the character and are placing bets for which new talent could pull it off the best. Lately I've seen actors like Jensen Ackles have their name tossed into the ring for who would be best to take up this role, but another few fan favorites almost since the beginning of the discussion with the announcement that the mutants would be coming to the MCU are Taron Egerton and Daniel Radcliffe, who I also think could pull off the role quite well. Number 1. Wolverine. There aren't just one, but actually 2 Wolverines that people would really love to see potentially head to the big screen. Or I guess I should say return to the big screen via the MCU. One of those Wolverines is Laura Kinney, formerly known as X-23, Wolverine's genetic offspring / clone. People fell in love with her character in the Fox film Logan, where we met a child version of X-23 who is brought to Logan and who he seeks to protect, even as he faces the end of his own life, with his healing factor struggling to keep up. Like Wolverine before her, Laura's Wolverine also has a powerful healing factor and is an immensely good fighter, having been trained since birth to be a weapon. Currently in the comics, Laura is also known as Wolverine, and some have theorized that instead of Logan, we could get Laura instead as our Wolverine. That way they wouldn't have to deal with recasting Wolverine in the same way, which might be a tall order, as there are many who were won over by Jackman's portrayal and who still love that version of the character. What are some of your favorite mutants? Which villains and heroes from the X-Men would you like to see appear in the MCU? What kind of castings would you like to see in general? Let us know in the comments below. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight. I'll see you in the next video, hopefully a part 2 to this list because there's more mutants I need to tell you about. But until then, you stay nerdy, YouTube. That way they wouldn't have to deal with recasting the male version of Wolverine. That way they wouldn't have to deal with recasting Wolverine, which might be a tall order as there are many others, blah blah blah. The many who were one, alright.